Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has hailed his country's ties with Russia, saying the allies stand together even in difficult times. The two leaders held talks on the sidelines of the SCO meeting in Tianjin against a backdrop of tense relations between India and the U.S. over New Delhi's continued purchases of Russian oil.
Mr. Modi noted that close cooperation between New Delhi and Moscow is vital, not just for the people, but for global peace, stability and prosperity. Mr. Putin described the nations as close and trusted friends. He added their friendship flourished because of strong public support, not politics.
Уважаемый господин премьер-министр, дорогой друг, Россия и Индия поддерживают десятилетиями особые отношения, дружеские, доверительные. Это фундамент для развития наших отношений в будущем.
Mr. Modi also used the meeting to highlight peaceful initiatives for the war in Ukraine. He said he hopes all sides will move together constructively, calling on its early resolution.
Excellency, यूक्रेन में चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय में हम लगातार चर्चा करते रहे हैं। हाल में किए गए शांति के सभी प्रयासों का हम स्वागत करते हैं। हम आशा करते हैं कि सभी पक्ष कंस्ट्रक्टिवली आगे बढ़ेंगे, संघर्ष को जल्द से जल्द खत्म करने और स्थायी शांति स्थापित करने का रास्ता खोजना होगा। ये पूरी मानवता की पुकार है। एक्सेलेंसी, एक बार फिर आपका मैं हृदय से बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूँ।
For more insight on the takeaways of the SCO summit, let's speak now with Dr. John Blaxland. He's the director of ANU North America and liaison professor of international security and intelligence studies at the Australian National University. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. I mean, this summit was clearly a stage for President Xi to promote his vision of a multipolar order. Just looking at the 5-point plan and also his rhetoric against multilateralism, do you think Mr. Xi achieved what he set out to in Tianjin?
There's something really here, Julie. It's quite a powerful representation of a symbolic unity between these great powers, India, Russia, and China. And that is something we wouldn't have seen a little while ago because the United States has been wooing India for some time and has been making a real concerted effort to make sure that India is well placed to support America's ambitions to check Chinese influence. But of course, what we've seen a real transformation here. Russia has always had a close relationship with India. India's had a codependency with Russia. For the United States to demand that it cut off its oil connections with Russia was a bridge too far, coupled with the surprising 50% tariffs imposed on India. It's driven India very much into China's arms, surprising everybody really, because for quite some time now, China and India have been very much at odds. So the dynamics are shifting. So when we see the optics, it looks very friendly and warm, but I think we need to be careful about reading too much into it.
Okay, understood, Professor. A slighted India, as you mentioned, I understand. And she also offered money and cheap loans as sweeteners, which probably made SCO members, even more receptive to his message. But how do you see more neutral countries reacting to Xi casting China as the new leader in world governance? I guess this is reaction from places like Switzerland, Sweden, South Africa, New Zealand, and even Singapore?
Exactly. So it's very interesting to see how President Xi positioned China's position on the United Nations, on the World Trade Organization, on global leadership, really, in a way that stands in stark contrast to the current administration in Washington's approach to what I would describe as transactional retreat from ideational leadership. It's unilateral, it's adversarial, and it's alienating the United States from many of its erstwhile partners and friends and allies. It's making it very difficult for some of them, most clearly evident with India, to actually continue to be all that closely aligned with the United States. So the dynamics are shifting here. The question is, can Xi and the SCO hold it together? Because there are competing powers and dynamics inside the SCO. This is not, exactly an open liberal democratic space we're talking about. It includes Myanmar, it includes Iran, it includes Russia, and of course China itself, which is not exactly the beacon of democracy. So these dynamics are all, the rhetoric of it is very much to try and make the United States look bad. Of course, the United States' attitude towards the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, its adversarial transactional approach to tariffs, is feeding into this dynamic that is making Xi and the SCO look all that more attractive at the moment, even though they've got significant limitations.
Right, and we saw some powerful optics, Mr. Modi and Putin holding hands, chatting with the President Xi. What kind of message was that intended to send, not only the U.S., as you mentioned, but the West in general?
Yeah, I think this is about India also making clear that it is not to be taken for granted. It is a great power. It is a major, influence on the world stage. It has a long history, of course, of in the colonial period of being trodden down and treated disrespectfully, and a sense that Modi is very, very sensitive to this. And of course, he very much reacts to any kind of patronizing management from outsiders. So this kind of rhetoric from Xi, from Putin, very much fits in with what Modi wants to hear, mindful, of course, that there are still significant constraints on what India can get out of the relationship with China, whereas it's, mindful. India still is very much an adversarial state compared to its neighbour Pakistan, which has a very close relationship with China. Similarly, the relationship between China and Myanmar, the pariah state on India's other side, is almost a client state of China. So India is playing a very delicate game here. It's playing the public face of engagement and being warm and friendly, but there are limits to how much that can turn into substantive policy action down the track.
Yeah, this is exactly the point I want to push you a little bit on, Professor. How deep do you think Narendra Modi is willing to dive here? Because the secret sauce, if you like, for India has been to avoid such over displays of warmth with China and Russia, expand ties with Washington, and in doing so, keep a seat at global forums, which are led by other major powers. I mean, so how deep do you think, or how much risk do you think Modi is going to take?
So there is a real risk there and so he's not going to the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. So that's probably checking the counterpoint for how that's going to sell domestically back in India. He needs to be careful of not overplaying the connection with China, because for the last few years, go back to half a decade now, the rhetoric about China has been quite adversarial, and it's worked pretty much to Modi's advantage to play that card. So for him to flip-flop on this too much could well blow back on him domestically. So we'll see where this goes from here. I'm not expecting substantively too much dramatically to change. And of course, this is also about applying pressure back on the Trump administration to make it clear to the Trump administration that India has options. And by presenting them as more positive, more viable than perhaps the substance would support, he's hopefully probably going to try and get some kind of concessions out of the Trump administration, mindful that this is really damaging, this 50% tariff on India. The relationship between India and the United States has been growing gangbusters. So this is a serious setback that he's keen to unwind.
Understood. So from the other perspective, if you like, from Beijing's perspective, it's gone and included, a statement, if you like, a strong condemnation, explicitly condemning that Pahalgam incident in April. Is this a sign that Beijing and President Xi Jinping is really serious about improving ties with India? I mean, we know about the border issues, we know about Pakistan, but again, how important is a signal such that the joint declaration was actually signed?
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I think we need to keep in mind what really matters to China, and that is the fate of Taiwan. So in terms of neutralizing China, neutralizing India, I should say, in the face of any Taiwan crisis is something that Xi will see as an advantage. And basically, that's the principal prism I would argue that this needs to be viewed through, making sure that India, that he can derail the Quad, the arrangement between India, Japan, Australia, and the United States, which now seems to be well and truly off tracks, off the rails, with President Trump indicating he's not going to be going to any Quad forum in India anytime soon. So that was a very carefully constructed quadripartite arrangement designed specifically to manage the rise of China. So if Xi is able to make the India leg of the Quad effectively neutralized, he is in a stronger position bargaining back with the United States, mindful that the relationship between the United States and India is still very much up for negotiation. There is nothing locked in then trading-wise, and of course the fate of Taiwan still very much hangs in the balance.
And Professor, I wonder what this means for Mr. Putin. And some analysts point to the fact that he comes out the winner here, keeping India dependent on Russian oil, at the same time sort of gaining diplomatic space through the SCO. Is Moscow emerging as a sort of a silent beneficiary here?
So that's a very good point because, Putin desperately wants as much support as he can muster. He's got clearly a lot of support from North Korea, not present at the SCO, but coming for the 80th anniversary celebrations. And he's keen to get more from China as well, because he's still trying to win the war in Ukraine. And despite all the very nice words from President Modi about the situation, Prime Minister Modi, I should say, about the situation in Ukraine, the bottom line is that Putin is not planning on backing down anytime soon. It's very clear that the Russian ambitions remain very maximalist in terms of conquest of Ukraine, and that they're mustering support at the SCO and deflecting any prospects of additional sanctions is really very much a victory for Putin, and that reinforces that sense of the coming out, if you like, from the imposition of sanctions and of a pariah status that the President Trump endorsed effectively a couple of weeks ago in Alaska.
And Professor, before we let you go, Presidency has another marquee event coming up tomorrow, the massive military parade in Beijing. What specific signals or surprises will you be looking out for?
Yeah, this is very interesting because, of course, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, did not play a very prominent role in the victory in the Pacific War. That was very much the Kuomintang, the Republic of China, the rump of which moved to Taiwan. So it's very interesting to see how that's being played by President Xi, a bit of reinvention of history there. Of course, China, the people of China very much suffered at the hands of the Japanese in the Second World War. And so there's an understandable recognition of this as an important moment. This is a bit of, in terms of history repeating itself, of history, martial power. This is the inversion of the century of humiliation. This is President Xi demonstrating to these invited guests and to the world on television that China is well and truly back from that, and it is not to be treated with any disrespect, and it is not to be taken lightly. That is clearly the message that's going to be very loud and clear tomorrow.
Yes, indeed, that parade taking place tomorrow. Dr. Blaxland, we have to leave it here for now. Thank you so much for your time this morning. John Blaxland is Director, ANU North America and Liaison Professor, International Security and Intelligence Studies at ANU. Thank you very much.